Hey luminaries, welcome back to Crowdsourced Illumination, CSI, and make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and select all the notifications, of course. Today we are continuing our series, Book Nook, reading The Franklin Cover-Up, Child Abuse, Satanism, and Murder in Nebraska by John DeCamp. In my previous video, I read the foreword. Tonight, I'll move on with the introduction and read through chapter 2 or so, depending on how long it takes. I'm still trying to get the feel for it, so I haven't really sorted out how long it takes to read a particular amount of pages or number of pages. So anyway, let me look at the chat. Hey Annie, how are you? It's nice to see ya. This introduction, y'all, is 25 pages long, and the first chapter is 4 pages long. The second chapter is a little longer. But, all right, let's get going with it. Hunker down, guys. Get your pillow and your blanket and a water or whatever it is that you like to drink when you're getting cozy and time for bed. We're going to read a bedtime story, not a very pleasant one. So here we go with the 25-page introduction. Hi, Doris. On June 21st, 1991, 21-year-old Alicia John Owen was pronounced guilty by a jury in Douglas County, Nebraska, on 8 counts of felony perjury. On August 8, 1991, she was sentenced to serve 9 to 27 years in prison. Owen was indicted for telling a grand jury before which she testified in 1990 that she was sexually abused as a juvenile by a Nebraska district court judge, by the chief of police of the city of Omaha, by the manager of the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union, and others. Alicia Owen also witnessed, she said, the abuse of other children by figures in Nebraska's political and financial establishment, whom she named, among them the publisher of the state's largest newspaper, the Omaha World-Herald. She testified she was in a group of Nebraska children who functioned for years as illegal drug couriers, traveling nationwide for some of Nebraska's wealthiest, most powerful, and prominent businessmen. 2 grand juries, 1 local and 1 federal, had a mandate to consider these and other charges of child abuse connected with the Franklin Credit Union. They indicted the victim with witnesses for perjury instead. This is unprecedented, probably in the history of the United States, commented Dr. Judy-Ann Denson-Gerber, a lawyer, psychiatrist, and nationally prominent specialist on child abuse, during her visit to Nebraska in December 1990. If the children are not telling the truth, particularly if they have been abused, they need help, medical attention. You don't throw them in jail. Both grand juries admitted that Alicia Owen and Paul Bonacci, whose testimony extensively corroborated Owen's, had been badly abused, but this was done, they concluded, by persons other than those the young people named. Bonacci, too, was indicted for perjury. 2 other victim witnesses, whose stories buttressed those of Owen and Bonacci, recanted under immense pressure. Alicia Owen and Paul Bonacci refused to recant. America is suffering an epidemic of child abuse. SOS America, a 1990 report from Washington, D.C.-based Children's Defense Fund, or CDF, said that a survey by the American Association of Protecting Children indicates that 2.2 million were reported abused, neglected, or both in 1987, a 225% increase since 1976, and 48 increase in the previous 5 years. CDF and other estimates caution, however, that only 1 in every 5 cases of abuse and neglect gets reported. The dimensions of the abuse are staggering, Dr. Nicholas Groth, director of the Sex Offender Program at the Connecticut Correctional Institute, told the New York Times in 1990. If we saw these same numbers of children suddenly developing some kind of illness, we'd think we had a major epidemic on our hands. Shocking as the numbers are, the nature of the crimes is more so. Even more frequently, abuse involves what law enforcement officials refer to as sadistic ritualistic features, or, to speak plainly, Satanism. What the victims of the type of abuse describe is so horrific that parents, teachers, and even child welfare workers have great difficulty to grasp what they are being told. The mind recoils from such evil inflicted on the most innocent of all people, children. In recent months, news media around the country have been full of propaganda to the effect that children who report abuse are just telling what they fantasized or stories fed to them by adults. As for satanic or ritualistic abuse, many newspapers declare that it does not even exist. At the New York Village Voice, as the New York Village Voice did in June 1990 article, which attacked the great ritualistic abuse hoax. A banner headline story in Chicago Tribune of May 1791, "A Chilling Tale of Child Abuse No One Can Prove," gave typical coverage of the debate over whether or not children are being abused by Satanists. And this is the article. All 9 children tell the same story, a grisly tale of being taken out of school and abused in a blue house. They named the same culprit, a school administrator who performed satanic rituals as part of his twisted routine. In the 14 months since the first child came forward, police said they have conducted 150 interviews and cannot substantiate the claims of the children, who ranged in age from 5 to 9 years old. Prosecutor Stanley Levko is more blunt. He doesn't believe them, and he plans to publicly clear the accused. But the children's enraged parents believe them, and a once skeptical psychologist also thinks they are telling the truth. All agree the children have been traumatized. The problem is no one can prove how. In all these cases, I don't know of a single shred of credible corroborating evidence, Levko said. This is me inserting. No credible corroborating evidence, yet they've got 9 children all telling the same stories within a 14-month period. Okay, back to this. The stories of the Evansville children reflect a recent bizarre trend in child abuse cases across the country. As more children are encouraged to step forward and expose adults who hurt them, police are encountering more cases of child abuse accompanied by allegations of occult rituals. And this was Evansville, Illinois. The Tribune cited Kenneth Lanning, the Federal Bureau of Investigation's expert on occult crime, on the virtual non-existence of ritualistic abuse. Lanning, who has publicized his opinion that more people have been killed in the name of Jesus and Muhammad than in the name of Satan, said on this occasion that there had been only 1 criminal conviction stemming from charges of satanic ritual abuse in the U.S. On April 28, 1991, the Omaha World Herald carried a story along these lines titled, "Satanism, Lots of Talk, Little Proof." It said that the problem was not an epidemic of satanic abuse, but rather, authorities say, America is witnessing an epidemic of concern over Satan and his minions, especially among adherents of fundamentalist Christianity. So-called ritual abuse is only part of it. But are these stories of incest and human sacrifice true? Many mental health experts think not, and at least 2 law enforcement officers with the FBI and the San Francisco police say that they have looked into some of the claims and found nothing. An embattled minority of law enforcement officials disagrees with Lanning of the FBI. Ted Gunderson, a 28-year FBI veteran, former special agent in charge of the Bureau's Los Angeles Field Division, speaks from his personal knowledge of one of the most infamous recent cases involving ritual abuse, the McMartin preschool case in California. After a 33-month trial, and despite voluminous evidence against them, school operators Peggy McMartin Buckey and her son, Raymond Buckey, were exonerated in January 1990 on 52 counts of molesting the children in their care, while the jury failed to reach a verdict on 13 other counts against Raymond Buckey. In a May 25, 1990 interview with Executive Intelligence Review, Gunderson said, "In the McMartin case, for example, before any criminal charges were filed against anyone, 460 complaints were filed with the Manhattan Beach Police. Are we to believe that 460 families fed their children the same story of ritualistic sexual abuse, animal sacrifices, etc.?" He stressed that the crimes were reported in an affluent suburban area where residents are typically skeptical about organized child abuse or satanic conspiracies. Gunderson commented on the effect of Lanning's disclaimers. "In my opinion, other than Satanists active in the United States in the 20th century, Aleister Crowley, Anton LaVey, and Michael Aquino, Ken Lanning is probably the most effective and foremost speaker for the satanic movement in this country, today or any time in the past." Evidence from Gunderson's investigation has convinced him that tens of thousands of children or young people disappear from their homes each year and that many are ritually sacrificed. A decade ago, one estimate printed in Reader's Digest in July 1982 was that approximately 100,000 children are unaccounted for each year. That number sounds too high, but nobody knows what the true figure is because the FBI does not keep count, Gunderson observes. The FBI has an accurate count of the number of automobiles stolen every year. It knows the number of homicides, rapes, and robberies, but the FBI has no idea of the number of children who disappear every year. They simply do not ask for the statistics. Every month, every major police department in the United States files its uniform crime statistics with the FBI. It would be simple for the Bureau to add one more column to the statistics and get a breakdown of every reported case of missing children, not to even mention children who are kidnapped for ritualistic purposes and in some cases murdered. I'm convinced that the FBI does not ask for these statistics because they don't want to see them. They would be confronted with an instant public outcry for action because the figures would show a major social problem. That problem would demand action. The Franklin Credit Union scandal, centered in Omaha, opens a window into the hideous world of child abuse and of organized illegal drug peddling, patronized and protected by powerful figures in politics and business. National media interest in the case flickered in 1988 when the Franklin Community Federal Credit Union was raided by federal agencies and shut down. Franklin's manager was Lawrence E. or Larry King Jr., then 44, not the other Larry King. This is a different one. A rising star in state and national Republican circles, an officer of the National Black Republican Council. King sang the national anthem at the GOP national conventions in 1984 and 1988. Nearly $40 million was missing from the coffers of the small, ostensibly community-oriented credit union. The financial scandal turned into something more when it became known that children from Omaha and its surroundings said they had been flown from city to city to be abused at parties held by Franklin's officers and well-known Nebraskans, including a nationally prominent Republican Party activist. A lurid, mysterious scandal begins taking shape in Omaha, headlined the New York Times. 3 years later, people living outside eastern Nebraska are unlikely to be aware of the Franklin scandal, and those in the region have been told that the case is closed. Larry King is serving his jail term for misappropriation of funds after a guilty plea. Law enforcement at the local, state, and federal levels said there was no evidence of drug peddling, organized child abuse, or satanic activity by King. The allegations of child abuse were a carefully crafted hoax, according to one of the two grand juries that examined the affair. A chief witness, Owen, stands convicted of perjury. Remember her? The day after Alicia Owen's conviction, 3,000 Nebraskans responded to a local radio station's poll. 94% of them said they believed that she had been railroaded and that there was a cover up. What the public suspects, the careful investigator of the Franklin case confronts face to face. This case is far from closed. This book will explore the substance of the Franklin case, much of which has never been revealed to the public until now. That means evidence concerning key players, which apparently was never brought before or was ignored by the grand juries. It means evidence gathered for the Nebraska Legislature's Special Committee on the Franklin case, which found and verified the tracks of criminal activity, where law enforcement purported to see none. The legislative investigation, which began in November 1988, ended on January 9, 1991, when a new legislature was sworn into office, and the investigative committee, authorized by the previous legislature, was automatically terminated and required by the state constitution. The legislature had the option to renew the investigation, but did not. Many members knew or suspected that the stakes were high, and they were terrified. I write about the unfolding of the Franklin case, its exposure, and its cover-up, as not only an eyewitness, but a participant in these events. I knew how high Larry King's reach went. I was sitting in the front row, just 15 feet from the main podium at the 1984 and 1988 Republican National Convention, duly elected by the people of the state of Nebraska as a delegate, pledged in the first instance to Ronald Reagan and in 1988 to George Bush. I was there as the story of the Franklin Credit Union and the child abuse broke in Nebraska. I wrote the DeCamp memo in 1990, which marked a new phase of the case. I will describe events in which I personally was involved. Most of these have never been made public, and it has pained me tremendously at times when I knew the Omaha World Herald was saying something false or distorting a fact, and I had no form or no legal right to respond because I had to protect a client or honor a legal privilege. As an attorney, furthermore, I have some specialization in cases of allegations by youngsters against adults in the area of child abuse. It has been my policy and belief, as it is now, that there is nothing worse than child abuse, with the possible exception of falsely accusing people of child abuse. Just in the past year, I have overturned 2 felony charges against individuals in rural Nebraska who were charged with abusing their daughters. Based on allegations from the daughters, I was convinced the girls were not telling the truth. I successfully proved this in both cases, and the girls broke down and told the whole story as to why they had lied. In addition, I am the lawyer for the National Child Abuse Defense and Resource Center of Nebraska, which fights against false accusation of child abuse and is made up of adults who have been falsely accused of child abuse. By contrast with these cases of fantasy, I can say without reservation that in one Franklin-related instance after another, there was sufficient evidence and corroboration available for anyone seeking it to back up the victims' tales. My own recollections and considered judgments are just a fraction of the huge record of the Franklin case. The files of the legislature's main investigator, the late Gary Caradori, testify to the mass of leads law enforcement. Excuse me, I'm trying to turn the page and I can't get it. Law enforcement would not pursue. Documentary evidence presented in this book never before made public, makes it possible to contrast the assurances of local and state officials that there was little or no Franklin related abuse with what those agencies had in their own files. The chapters of this book dealing with Franklin are based, apart from my own direct experience, strictly on documents available and documented facts. I do not claim to know the accuracy or veracity of every statement made by every witness or other person recorded in these documents. I do claim, however, that the statements and evidence were officially presented exactly as described. Readers can draw their own conclusions as to what is or is not believable. I have been very careful to present only material and documents which I can legally and properly, in my opinion, make available. I also must state that I received none of the Franklin Committee documents from the committee's chairman, Senator Lauren Schmidt, other than what I was entitled to as attorney for Paul Bonacci. Some people inevitably will claim, as they did when I issued the DeCamp memo in January 1990, that Senator Schmidt, whose private attorney I am, leaked everything to me. I said then, and I say now, that nothing could be further from the truth. Neither is anything whatsoever from grand jury documents, some of which I had access to, presented here, because I am not allowed to disclose this information. I wish I could. I wish everything about Franklin could be made public. Then the public could judge even more thoroughly about what is true and what is false. I believe that sunshine and exposure of all facts from all agencies that have information about Franklin would establish the truth of the stories of drug abuse, child abuse, pedophilia, abuse of positions of public trust, cover up by institutions of government, and most tragic, involvement in this conduct and latter cover up by some of our most respected and wealthiest citizens. I believe that the record must get out into the open to the extent possible, and that the public has to share the information. Otherwise, truth becomes whatever those who control the institutions of government and the press say it is. Benjamin Franklin said, "Whoever would overthrow the liberty of a nation must begin by subduing the freeness of speech." For a textbook example of how this can be done, I would say, come to YouTube. No, I'm just kidding. It says, come to Nebraska. Watch how, when you totally control the press, when you own the press, you can make truth be whatever you want. You can make villains out of heroes, sinners out of saints, and vice versa. In this book, therefore, much of the material has been kept in its documentary form. The words of investigators, state senators, victim witness parents, police, or FBI, as recorded in police documents, eyewitness reports, testimony to the legislature, published interviews, and so on. I will allow these documents to speak for themselves. Spelling and punctuation have been left as they appear in documents, except for minor punctuation changes in transcripts. Interpolations in quoted material are denoted by brackets. When the name of a victim or other person is not his or her real name, it is marked with an asterisk, the first name, the first time it appears. The Franklin case, which has dominated political life in Nebraska for 3 years, has chilling implications for the whole United States, and I argued the whole world. The unfinished business of the Franklin's investigation is a matter not only of justice for children in one state, but of lives of untold numbers of children everywhere. Evidence developed from Franklin and King's activities leads into drug trafficking, money laundering, pornography, child prostitution, and the kidnapping and sale of children in different parts of the United States and abroad. The shocking treatment of Alicia Owen and Paul Bonacci by the courts in Nebraska is one giveaway of what a high stake has been wagered on suppressing the Franklin scandal. Members of the state Senate and investigators who sought to discover the truth of the matter found out earlier on in a personal, violent manner. Chapter 1. Nebraska is death-laced. I'm going to check the chat here. Wouldn't that be funny if I was on mute this whole time? Oh my gosh. I would be so pissed. Oh my God. Hi, Tanya. I didn't even see you in here. Radar. Oh, Radar, thanks for coming. Amber, of course. Anon, Anon, thank you for coming. Angie Marie, girl. Amber, are you tripping on your editing? It sucks. That's why you do lives. And Annie Ferguson was in here earlier. Chris G. Uh, oh, JFJ Live was in here earlier. Y'all are sweet. Thank you so much for showing loves. Thank you. Oh, celebrities who are Radar, JFJ Live, and Amber. That's awesome, Chris. That's funny. Celebrities. Only in our own little worlds are we ever celebrities, you know? Okay, I'm going to get into chapter 1 here. It's only 4 pages long, but I think it'll give a good idea of what the rest of the book is going to be like. And after I finish chapter 1, we'll take a vote on whether we move on to chapter 2 or if we stop here. Hey girl, thanks Annie for coming back. I know. I don't ever read a book myself anymore either, and I've been so mad at myself. So I thought this would be a good way because if I'm reading it to someone else, I'm more likely to read it. I mean, I read to my kids, but I never read for myself. So, okay, chapter 1. Nebraska is death laced. If even half of what I have heard is true, this is the biggest thing to ever hit Nebraska, Gary Caradori told his wife, Sandy, late one night in August 1989. Although he was exhausted, the new chief investigator for the Nebraska's legislature Franklin Committee did not sleep that night. There was more cause for sleeplessness in the weeks that followed. On September 14, 1989, someone broke into the Caradori's home. By January 1990, Caradori was writing to Nebraska's Secretary of State, Alan Bierman. We, my employees, and myself have been followed, and questionable situations have arisen during this investigation. Threatening situations have resulted in numerous times. Why? Am I too close to something they do not want to become public? End quote. On April 13, 1990, a repairman from the executive company reported to Caradori that his phone was tapped, a finding confirmed to him by sources inside the phone company. The investigator continued to work with a growing sense of the importance of his task. On May 29, 1990, Caradori wrote to Franklin Committee Chairman Lawrence Schmidt. To be frank, he told the senator, it is my opinion that we are the only ones who are seriously working to get this case out in the open, so to speak. I honestly feel that should we terminate this investigation, that no further work will be done on it. End quote. On June 23, 1990, Caradori took a few hours off to attend a barbecue at the Omaha home of Mary Lyon Barrett. Most of those present were members of the concerned parents, a group of citizens who were outraged about the lack of serious investigation of child abuse by state or federal authorities, and the campaign in Nebraska's major newspaper, the Omaha World-Herald, to discredit young victim witnesses. Arriving in a 1980 white Corvette, Caradori told concerned parents president Trish Lanphier he had taken the car out of storage for the day's drive because his other vehicles had been tampered with, and he was sure that no one had ever seen that car. He was planning to sell his boat for the same reason. But what he most feared, he told Lanphier, was that someone would tamper with the private plane he often flew. It would be so easy to tamper with a plane, he said. In early July 1990, Caradori phoned Senator Schmidt. We've got them, he exclaimed, about some new evidence he had just developed. There's no way they can get out of it now. He and his son Andrew, AJ, would be flying to Chicago for the All-Star game the weekend of July 7th through 8th, he told Schmidt. Caradori was going to do a little investigating on the side and would review the new evidence with the senator upon his return the following Monday. On that Wednesday morning, July 11, 1990, Senator Schmidt was in his office talking with a journalist about the Franklin investigation. He related the numerous threats received by himself and Caradori and Caradori's evaluation of those threats. It's unlikely that they would kill you or me, Lauren, because that would be too obvious, Gary said once. But then again, you never know. At about 10:30 a.m., Senator Schmidt took a phone call. He listened for a moment, appeared shaken, and said, "Oh, my God, no." After asking a few questions, he hung up, tears in his eyes. Gary's dead. It happened at 2:30 a.m. on July 11th. When Gary and AJ were flying back to Lincoln, Nebraska from Chicago, a farmer in Lee County, Illinois, reported he saw a flash of light, heard an explosion, and saw a plane plunge to the ground. The Caradoris were killed. The plane's wreckage scattered over 3/4 of a mile. The eyewitness account of a flash of light and an explosion was on the early edition of television news in Nebraska, but got pulled from subsequent reports, which said the plane exploded on impact. At the Nebraska State House that morning, Senator Schmidt talked to reporters who soon filled his office. There were a lot of people in the state who wanted to see Gary dead, he charged. They got their wish. The question to be answered is whether it was a coincidence. We know in true crime there's not too many coincidences. I mean, come on. That's True Crime 101. Gary's brother, Dick Caradori, was interviewed by the Lincoln Journal about the many threats Gary had received. I know that it weighed a lot on his mind, Dick said. He always hoped that they just didn't cover it up, he said. There was a lot to it and a lot of big names involved and hoped their money wouldn't sweep it under the rug. Gary's mother, Mary, told the paper that Gary cared dearly about the people involved in the Franklin case. He worked day and night for them. Sandy Caradori never received official notifications of her husband and son's deaths. She heard the news from friends who heard it on the radio. Early the next day, before the bodies were even home from Illinois, the FBI descended on Caradori's office with a subpoena for all his records. What evidence had Caradori turned up? According to the Lincoln Journal, the day after Caradori's death, Schmidt confirmed that Gary Caradori had been trying to obtain pictures that some alleged victims said were taken of them during the period when they were being abused. He also confirmed that Caradori had been told that some of those allegedly involved in child sexual abuse had exposed some of the victims to satanic cultism. He was working on places and times. He was also working on leads into Washington, D.C. So this is all the way from Nebraska to Washington, D.C., and probably further, as they've kind of mentioned too. Mystery surrounded not only the crash of the airplane, but Caradori's whole trip. Gary and AJ had stayed at the Days Inn Lakefront Motel in Chicago, where both his wife and his associate, Karen J. Ormiston, had telephoned, asked for him by name, and spoken with him. Their phone bills showed the calls, but motel management would tell Caradori's investigative firm there was no record of his ever having stayed there. And if there was no record that Caradori had registered at the motel, there was also no record of what phone calls he might have made from Chicago. After months of investigation, the National Transportation Safety Board had not come up with the cause of the crash. My friend Bill Colby, former director of the CIA, commented after he looked into the matter that the cause would probably never be known. Mary Caradori rendered her own verdict on the deaths of Gary and AJ. My son and grandson were murdered. Many Nebraskans echoed her opinion. They were growing They have growing grounds for suspicion. From late 1988, when the Franklin case first broke into public view, until mid 1991, at least 15 people associated with the case as investigators, alleged perpetrators, or potential witnesses died sudden deaths, many of them violent. In December 1990, as Dr. Denson Gerber prepared to travel to Nebraska at the request of the legislature's Franklin Committee, she consulted several friends with relevant expertise. One of them was a member of the New York State Police, who warned her, "Don't go, Nebraska is death-laced." Caradori's death cast a pall of terror over the state. Civil rights leader Reverend James Bevel, who visited Nebraska in October 1990 as part of a fact-finding commission, said that he had never seen such terror on people's faces, not even on the faces of Mississippi. I don't want to say this word. Mississippians in the 1950s and 1960s who lived under the threat of lynchings by the Gosh, I would have just left that whole sentence out. Good Lord. That was unnecessary. It was really extra. I'm sorry, guys. If I had read before, I would have not read that sentence. I apologize. In this atmosphere, Douglas County and federal grand juries indicted victim witnesses Alicia Owens and Paul Bonacci. The Senate Franklin Committee went out of existence in January 9, 91. On June 21, 1991, Alicia Owen was found guilty, and Douglas County prosecutors dropped the charges against Paul Bonacci. As far as the Nebraska political establishment was concerned, the door on the Franklin case was slammed shut for good. Thousands of Nebraska citizens are concerned that what Gary Caradori uncovered not go with him to the grave. The story of the Franklin Credit Union investigation is intertwined with the systemic cover-up that investigation confronted from the time of the first cries for help from children 6 years ago. The next chapter is Larry King, a man well known to children, and that's chapter 2. But I think we'll stop for tonight and head over. Oh, thanks for posting that Discord. Yeah, Discord is fun. We get chatty over there. But thanks for listening for tonight. And, I'll continue tomorrow with another reading. I'm going to probably try to do a couple of readings every day. What I'll do is I will record them in advance in a video, and I'll post it as a premiere instead of a live. And what that is the premiere is just the videos playing, and so I can be free to participate in the live chat, which is really cool. So that's what I'm going to do to save the StreamYard hours, but also because I kind of like it. I think I would like to participate in the discussion of what's being read. So anyway, that is going to be tomorrow, and the book is not very long, actually. I'll tell you here in a second. There's an index from, wow. 393 pages, and we're already on page 5, so we are really making some headway here. Just kidding. Anyway, Radar, thank you for coming. It was great. And you're just now coming on my radar, so I have to I think I heard somewhere that you have a channel, so I need to go check that out. So does that make sense with the premiere? So it'll be like a live, but I won't have to Um, I won't have to be distracted by what I'm doing. So, all right, y'all. So that's what we're going to do tomorrow. And I think it'll be fun. And then, oh, we have a murder mystery that the game is coming up again. So, if you're going to be interested in that, it's about 2 weeks from now. So, or so. So throw your names in the hat. Hey, Nick, thank you. Thank you for coming, man. I'm gonna probably head over here. I think True Crime Recliner was coming on about 12 minutes ago. So I'm gonna go head over there too. I'm sure we'll see each other over there. Um, so all right, y'all. I will talk to you guys later and good night. Be well. Love you and bye.